for today's session, I am joined by two very special colleagues of mine. As you all know, I'm working with the Zero Hunger Lab at Tilburg University. And today we are joined by Professor Hein Fleuren, founder and the scientific director of the Zero Hunger Lab, as well as Dr. Marleen Balvart, who is a researcher at the Zero Hunger Lab and is one of my direct supervisors. They will be talking about how to use data science for social good in general, and then Hein will go more in detail about using data science in Zero Hunger. Marleen will start first, and then her session will be more about the general applications of data science for social good. Then you can ask your questions, and then Hein will go and talk about more details about the work that we do with the Zero Hunger Lab. And Becca, if you don't have anything to add to that, I'll give the stage to Marleen to start.
All right. Thank you, Hesja. First of all, everybody, happy International Women's Day today. Also to the men, of course. Before we get started and before I start my slides, just a little quick idea of your background. I would actually like to know a little more of all of your backgrounds, but that's too much for the short amount of time we have. So is any one of you involved in Zero Hunger, for starters? Please feel free to raise your hand digitally or physically. 2 people. And who of you has experience with data science, mathematics, that sort of topics? 1, 2, quite a number more. Okay. So I will, because of the low number of people who have some affinity with data science, I'll start from the basics. My goal today for this first half is to mostly show you what type of questions you can answer with data science and give you a little bit of a feeling of how that works. And after that, we'll have a break. And then after the break, Hein will continue with what the Zero Hunger Lab does with data science to use that to help achieving zero hunger. So, yes, I suppose you can see these slides over here. Okay, great. And I will also make sure that I can see all of you, because that makes it a lot more fun. Yes, there you guys are. Okay, great. So, as Hesja already said, my name is Marleen Balvart. I'm a researcher at the Zero Hunger Lab, and the Zero Hunger Lab is a part of Tilburg University in a small town in Tilburg in the Netherlands. Now, at the Zero Hunger Lab, we started some time ago. We started September 2019. The Zero Hunger Lab was funded, and the idea is that we use data science in a research setting. So we answer the research questions related to issues in hunger, and there's many ways you can do that. But what connects the people at the Zero Hunger Lab? Well, there's a few characteristics. All of us, we love mathematics, we love numbers, we love formulas, functions, models, all that sort of stuff. So mathematics is a key point for us. Also, we love big data. The more data there is, the more information there is, the higher the challenge for us to abstract useful information from it and to use that to make better decisions or to get more information. And then finally, so this is what holds for quite a number of people, but something that holds for all of us for sure as well is we love to help other people using the knowledge that we have. And I guess that this last point is something that connects you as well. So here you see a very young baby. She unfortunately is malnourished, which you can very quickly see, and she needs help. So she is a major inspiration for many of us at the Zero Hunger Lab. And what we do is we combine these 3 passions of ours to help organizations achieve zero hunger. I see there's a lot going on in the chat. Hesja, will you let me know if there is something that I should respond to, and so that also the internal discussion can just continue there. All right, so data science, we're using data science, and you can use data science because it's a big hype and everybody does it. But of course, there are way better reasons to use data science. So why would you use that? Data science, mathematics, why would you use it? Well, first of all, the reason why many enterprises use data science is it can help you save a lot of money. Data science can help you make smarter decisions, choose where to invest, choose how to set up your organization in such a way that you save costs and therefore maximize profits. That's one thing. Oh, and actually the example that you see here is an image of dikes. The Netherlands is a country that for the most part lies below sea level. So we have a high risk of floods. One of the professors at our university helped the Dutch government to decide which dikes to raise, how high they should be, such that the lives of the people in the Netherlands are still safe, but we do not spend an extensive amount of money that is actually unnecessary. You can do more. Data can give you a lot of insight. This is the main reason why people are collecting data. There's lots of information in it, and it can give you insight. But also computers and simulation can give you insight. So what you cannot do in reality is just try a couple of things and see what works best and then choose what works best. You cannot do that in reality, but in modeling you can. You create a model that represents reality as well as possible, and you just try a couple of things and see how that works out. And then, of course, you choose your best option. And by gaining insight, you can make better decisions. You have to be careful, though. You can find all sorts of correlations in data, and those correlations can be very useful, but they can also be spurious. The example that you see over here is a graph of the number of non-commercial space launches worldwide in each year, and the number of doctorates awarded in sociology. And if you look at the figure, you clearly see there is some correlation between these two. Then, of course, you can say, well, then of course they are connected. Well, at first glance, maybe not. It may be because there is some relation for both with investments in science, but that is pretty much a far stretch. Definitely the one does not influence the other. Sometimes you can find very useful correlations, but here you see that where computers and mathematics can do a lot, we as the people who use the computers and mathematics still need to continue thinking. So this is all very nice, but actually the most important one that we envision in Zero Hunger Lab is you can save lives using mathematics and data science. One way is by helping, for example, the logistics of the World Food Programme, which Hein will tell about later, or create an app that detects malnourishment of young children. Another way is in lots of medical devices. There are lots of optimization problems, data science problems in medical devices. For example, the device that you see over here. So this is a radiation therapy delivery device. And the software that decides from which angle to irradiate a patient and with what intensity, that software is optimization software, and there's a lot of mathematics behind it. So this is the why. Now we come to the how. How should we all do this? Well, first of all, we need a couple of ingredients, and one of those ingredients is data. There are huge amounts of data over there. We should not just leave them lying around, we should actually use them. But these huge amounts of data do not just fit in an Excel sheet, and if you scroll through an Excel sheet, you can't make anything out of it. So what we also need is a mathematical model. Mathematical modeling can help us make sense of this data. But then still, there's one more ingredient that we need. Mathematics and data together are not enough. We also need compute power. The data is getting so large nowadays that we need stronger computers to be able to analyze all this data. Now, and this together gives solutions. Of course, we do still need to put all the puzzle pieces together, and that is what we love to do at the Zero Hunger Lab. So, big data, the first ingredient. How big is big? Well, if you look at just the past minute, then lots of new data was generated. The past minute, all over the world, 150 million emails were sent. You also see that there were more than 120 new LinkedIn accounts created. Almost 1 million swipes at Tinder happened. So there's a lot of data going on in the world just in 1 minute. And we want to collect all that data and want to make sense out of it. Well, maybe not all the data, maybe we're not too interested in the Tinder data, but there's lots of information out there that you would like to use. So we should store it somewhere, and that's actually not an issue because the computers that we have today, they have huge amounts of memory. It used to be quite expensive to store data, but those costs have decreased by a lot. So this is not a problem. We can store the data, we can open it, we can look at it. Storing data is not an issue. What is the issue then? Well, storing data is not easy. For example, look at this database over here. Here you see a couple of food products, and these food products, each column corresponds to a different database, but they are all from the same organization. Within the same organization, you see here that the same food product can have many different names. Already here, maize in capital letters and maize in lowercase letters, these two are already viewed different by a computer. So as long as you do not standardize, you get into trouble. This is a main point in many databases. If different people are involved, everybody writes things down in their own way. So standardization is very important if you want to organize these huge, huge amounts of data. But of course, this is a solvable problem. This is a matter of making agreements with one another. So another issue, if we have to do all those computations, do we have enough compute power? Well, back in the days when computers started, 1900s, we couldn't do much yet. But as you can see, compute power increased tremendously. So what you see here on the horizontal axis is the number of calculations a computer can do in just 1 second. If you have a computer, well, that depends on the price, of course, but what is possible increased a lot. So this looks like a reasonable increase, but if you then look at the numbers that are over here, we do not go from 0 to 1 to 2, we go from 0 to 100, 10,000, a million. So this increase is really huge. We have huge amounts of computer power, and the future is even looking very good because of quantum computing. So this sounds like we've solved all the problems, right? This sounds like we do not need smart people organizing, making algorithms and all that stuff anymore because we have memory, we have computers. What is needed still? Well, to give you an idea, we use a very simple example over here. You see a map of Tilburg, which is where our university is. You see our university here on the left. And suppose you live here in the south of Tilburg and you made a bet with your friends. Unfortunately, you lost the bet. Too bad. So that means you have to deliver a beer to all of your friends. And your two friends one lives in the east, one lives in the west. And the question is, well, you don't want to spend too much time on the bet that you lost, so you want to visit them as fast as you can. Which route should you take? Yeah, there's just two people, so it's not that difficult. You go either to the first and then to the second, or you go to the second and then to the first. So you have two friends, there are only two routes you can choose from. That's simple, right? Easy question. Now you have three friends, and you lost the bet again. For you. Again, you want to go as fast as possible. What is the fastest route you can take over here? Well, looking at the map, it already makes sense that you should travel either counterclockwise or clockwise, but suppose you do not have this knowledge, we're going to be very naive here. We want to check the length of each of the possible routes. How many routes are there? Well, you first have to choose which friends to go to first, 3 options, and then you have to choose which friend to go to next. That's another 2 options, because there's just 2 friends left. So that means that you have 3 times 2, and then you go to the last friend, 6 possible routes. You check all those routes, how long they are, and you take the fastest route. And we keep going. How about if there are 4 friends? Again, we're going to check all the routes. First, choose which person to visit first. That's 4 options. Then there's another 3 options for whom to visit next, and another 2 options for whom to visit after that. So that means that we have 4 times 3 times 2 possible routes over here, and that's 24. I don't know about you guys, but I do not like to write manually down 24 routes and calculate how long each of them takes and then choose the fastest one. What if you have 5 friends? Well, you know the trick by now, right? It gets even worse. There's 120 possible routes. 6 friends, even worse. 6 times 4 times 5 times 4, 3 times 2. 720 routes. How about if you have 20 friends? If you have 20 friends, there are approximately 2.5 times 10 to the power 18, so that's a 1 with 18 zeros, possible routes. You don't want to write that down manually, so we're going to use a computer. The computer can just check each of these routes and figure out how long the route is. And now we already saw that computers are very strong, so how long would a computer take to do this? So let's do a little bit of hand raising again. Who thinks the computer can do this in at most 5 minutes? Who would go for at most an hour?
I would go for at most like 5 seconds because it's like gigahertz.
Because it's very fast, right?
Yeah.
It
depends on whether Marleen's talking about the original computer or today's computers, though.
I'm talking about today's computer.
Okay, then yes,
We're going for today. Yeah. Would anybody say anything more than an hour? Just anybody?
No.
Walid says yes.
I think even the computer cannot solve it in just a few seconds. It will last for years. For 4 years to calculate or solve the problem, and it's not efficient. It's not efficient to calculate this number of iterations. So when it comes to the cost, it is better to not solve this problem.
Yeah, exactly. So how we hear many different answers, right? There's 5 seconds up to a couple of years. Let's see who is right about that, because we know the number of routes that we have. We know how many computations a computer can do in, say, a minute. Let's have a look. A laptop evaluates 1 billion rounds per second, which is a huge number. So if you divide this number by 1 billion, we conclude that it takes about 77 years to compute all these routes. So even with the compute power of today, Walid, you were exactly right. Even with the compute power of today, this is going to take way too long. So we need smart algorithms to solve this kind of questions. And here you already see one example of a question that you can answer with mathematics, and that is a routing question. All right, so that's why this all is important. Now let's go into 2 types of modeling, 2 types of data-related questions. One is optimization. We already saw an example, minimize the length of the traveling. And the other one is machine learning. And you probably heard this word a lot over the past couple of years because it's become a big hype. We'll start with optimization. Now in optimization, what we generally tend to do is we're trying to minimize or maximize something. So minimize the length of the route. In most company cases, maximize your profit, that sort of questions. Now, at Zero Hunger Lab, we're of course interested in food, and there's lots of decisions you can make about food. You can make your own diet. What do you want to eat? What should you eat? Those are totally different questions. And there has been quite a bit of research about this. First of all, the most important research report there is about this is the Eat Lancet. And the Eat Lancet was a committee who looked at which diets are both healthy and sustainable. And they wrote a report about that. And this diet that you see over here shows you how much you should eat of each type of food product, such that you have a healthy and a sustainable diet. Now, how can you come to these diets? Well, that is actually with optimization. It's not what the committee of the Eat Lancet did, but you can do it with optimization. So that's actually one of the projects we're working on at Zero Hunger Lab. And we're going to add one more aspect. It has to be affordable as well, because not everybody in the world has unlimited funds. So first of all, when is a diet healthy? Well, simply it needs to meet certain nutritional requirements. You need a certain amount of vitamins, protein, energy, all that sort of stuff. It also needs to be sustainable, which means that we want to minimize the environmental impact. Of course, eating nothing is the least environmental impact, but then we have the nutritional requirements that say this is the least amount that you have to eat. With that given, we're minimizing the environmental impact. Also, we need to minimize the costs. Same like environmental impact, you need to meet the nutritional requirements, which sort of set a lower bar, and then we're minimizing the cost. We're making decisions that are the cheapest, but still healthy and still sustainable. Now you can write this down as an optimization problem. And basically that looks as follows. So I already mentioned that we are minimizing two things. We're minimizing cost and we're minimizing environmental impact. We're not setting any bars, we're just saying as low as you can go. On nutritional value, we do set some lower bars because it's known what you as a human being need. There is a minimal energy intake you need, there is a minimal intake of protein that you need, and there's a minimal intake of vitamins that you need, and a lot more. Now, this is the standard form of an optimization problem, and you can feed this to the computer, and the computer will then give you the diet that minimizes cost and environmental impact, such that you still have a healthy diet. But of course, you have to write it into formulas, otherwise the computer will not understand. Now, there were two things we want to minimize, and that makes it a little difficult. There's costs and there's environmental impact. And if you minimize costs, you may forget about the environmental impact. And if you minimize environmental impact, you may forget about the costs a little bit. So actually, there are many different options that strike the balance between the two. Now, we're now going to look at this graph, and there are several options. Of course, you want to be low on this axis, and you want to be low on this axis. Now, suppose that we're looking at 4 different diets, A, B, C, and D. There's 4 options. Think about it for a little bit. Which of those 4 do you like best? Who would go for diet A? Nobody. Who would go for diet B?
I would go for B.
Anybody for C? Anybody for D?
And Marleen, while we're thinking through this, can you give us a little bit of examples about what environmental impact for food means? Kind of what are some examples of those?
Good question. So environmental impact, if you can imagine, if you consume certain products, they have, for example, a large carbon footprint per amount of protein that you take in or per amount of energy that you take in. There are certain products that need a lot of water usage for production. And there are other products that do not have such an environmental impact, but still you meet the nutritional requirements. So that's the balance that we're basically looking for. Some of these environmental friendly products are expensive, others not so much. Does that answer your question?
I guess mainly we should be looking into the objective of the problem itself. So before choosing A, B, or C, I think we should look into the deep outcome of it, and who is the targeted audience of such a process vis-a-vis are the costs affordable for these targeted audiences, and then we can go with D, maybe they cannot afford, or go with C, lower cost, higher impact, so on and so forth. And I think keeping the outcome in mind, that can drive the optimization process to be localized and targeted very well.
Yes, you point out a very, very important thing over here, namely that the answer is not the same for everybody. So for some people, costs are incredibly important. For other people, environmental impact is incredibly important. For some people, it's somewhere in between. And this is a very important thing. So the one thing that I wanted to point out over here is that, so nobody chose D, and I'm happy about that, because D is more expensive than C and has a worse environmental impact than C. So yes, you guys were right. D is not a very good idea. Also, nobody pointed out A. The environmental impact is the same, but it's more expensive. But B and C, as Ahmad already pointed out, they're basically a different trade-off. C is better in terms of cost, but B is better in terms of environmental impact. And different people make different choices over here. But what we can definitely do is throw away A and D. And what you can do with mathematics, you can use mathematics to generate the entire curve with the balance between these two choices. And if the model that you use shows you this entire curve, then everybody can make their own choice on this curve. Everybody can say, well, this is the amount of money that I want to spend on my food. And then you get a diet with minimal environmental impact. You can make a choice based on this curve. Thanks, Ahmad. That was a very good point. So the research that we do on this topic is together with the World Food Programme. Johns Hopkins University has a lot of knowledge about food-related data, and Capgemini is involved as well to work on the dashboard, because we're creating a model that gives these trade-offs to the World Food Programme. So that's about the optimization part. Are there any questions up to this point before I move on to machine learning? All right. Yeah.
I'm very sorry.
No, that's okay.
I come from Jordan, and we highly have the issue of data poverty vis-a-vis the I would say the unaccessibility of data, plus the unavailability of it, mentioning that data literacy and digital literacy is not really a big thing in the public sector, and so on and so forth. And I think that's one of the main issues whenever that we have a good data science course or optimization course, we cannot apply due to missing data resources. And I was wondering, whenever that you face that kind of issue, what can be done in terms of such problems in order to have a more realistic and model-based approach?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things you could do. First of all, nutritional information is available and of course holds for any country, because it's, well, what is in a product is in a product, generally speaking. I can imagine that in terms of this problem, for the food optimization problem, cost data may not be there indeed. So there are ways of abstracting information from public data sets, but this indeed might give some issues. So the only way in terms of this problem, the only way to go about it then, I would say, is have organizations such as the World Food Programme still try to collect as much as they can, and try to work with that. But there's always this issue of not enough data, and seeing what you can get that is publicly out there worldwide, which is still applicable to the specific case.
And it's, I mean, this is exactly why we think this program is so important, right? And why we're really honing in on evidence-based change making, because it is a big gap for a lot of us working in the region. So we will also do some sessions that are more specifically about accessing and finding and sometimes creating data, right? Because that may be the other answer is, I mean, you know, we can't create everything, and certainly not to the scale that the Zero Hunger Lab are able to get their hands on, and what we'll hear about from examples today. But we do think that we can translate a lot of these tools and the ways of thinking to what small data sets we're able to create based on our own programs and that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And created data can still give you estimates. Might not be exact, but still gives you a direction on where you want to go. Yeah. All right. So a second type of problem that I would like to show you is machine learning. And for this topic, I will step away from Zero Hunger and look at a healthcare application. So machine learning is a big hype over the past 10 years. And what it basically does is it takes in some data about the past, try to find patterns in there, and use the patterns to look at a new observation and make a prediction about it. That's the abstract description of what machine learning does. Now, something some of you may have seen in your prior education is linear regression. This is the basic example of machine learning. And the standard example of linear regression is this. You have a group of people And those people all have a weight and a height. You plot them, and what you want to do now is find a relationship between weight and height, because if a new person comes in and we do observe their height, we want to make a guess about their weight. So what you generally do is you fit a line through these points such that it fits as well as possible. And from that, if now somebody else comes in and we see that they are 1.77 meters high, then we can make an estimate about their weight. This is basically what machine learning does. It takes the relationship it learns from previously observed data, makes a prediction about a new person. There are much more complex methods than just linear regression. And for that, I will give you an example using genetics. So there are many diseases that are caused by genetic variations. You can think of cancer or Alzheimer's or ALS. And we can figure out which genetic variations cause these diseases using data. Here you see an example of a very small database of 9 people. 5 of them are healthy, 4 of them have the disease that we are studying. And you see their genetic information. So genetic information is always written down as a list of A's, C's, T's, and G's, basically representing 4 different types of molecules. Forget about the biology. Just remember for now that we have 4 letters in this sequence. For most part, for 99.9%, every human being in the world is the same, exactly the same genome. Just this 0.1% makes us different, which generally leads to very, very easy, simple differences such as your height or your weight, but sometimes it can cause a disease. Now the question is, which genetic variants cause this disease? For that, of course, we're only going to look at the differences between people. So let's look at this sequence as just some sequence, and there are some differences indicated in pink. So these pink spots are where this individual differs from the majority. Now, which characteristics cause disease? Let's have a look at the first one. Everybody has an A here except for a couple of people. One of the people with a C is healthy and the other person has the disease. So I can very simply conclude that having a C in this position is not causing the disease. Now you can keep going along all of these positions, and what you see then is if you end up over here, everybody who has this variation also has the disease. Not everybody with the disease has the variation, but a disease can be caused by multiple different variations. So everybody who has the variation also has the disease, means that this variation causes the disease. Now we've explained disease for people 6 and 7, but not for 8 and 9 yet. So we keep searching and we will not find anything because 8 and 9 are a little more complicated. What you see is that for 8 and 9, they both have both of these variations, which means that but only having one of these variations, for example, this one or this one, people are just healthy. That already makes it a little more difficult, right? Because also combinations of variations can cause disease. So you see there's a lot of complexity in figuring out what the relationship between the genetics and the disease is. You cannot just check them one by one. You also have to check all combinations. You have to check all combinations of 3, of 4, etc. That is exploding. That's huge. So we need something smarter. We need a data analysis tool that can basically figure out which genetic variants cause disease. And that data analysis tool does the following. It takes in the entire data set of healthy and unhealthy people. It does some magic and it spits out the following. It tells us if you have these 2 variations over here, or if you have this 1 variation, or if you have these 4 variations over here, then you have the disease. Now, it is not going to be possible to go into the data analysis tools for this here because that is a huge topic. Actually, it's an unsolved problem so far. But I can tell you some of the complexities in this problem. One of them I already mentioned. It's not just about 1 variation, but about combinations of 2 or 4 or more variations. Another one is the size of the data. If you would write down your genetic code, this is what it looks like. It is huge. You have about 5 billion A's, T's, and G's in your DNA. So that's a lot. And this is just one person, right? We need a database with tens of thousands of people before we can analyze this. So the database pretty much looks like this. It's enormous. That means that we need a very smart method that can analyze these huge amounts of data. And those are deep neural networks. That also may ring a bell for you. So the challenge in genetics data is you have huge data, you have complex interactions, and this is what happens in a lot of situations. But what you should wonder when choosing your methods or finding somebody who can help you with your data questions is, first of all, how large is your data? That really determines which methods you can and cannot use. Are you predicting a class, so diseased or non-diseased, or a value, a weight? How complex do you expect the underlying relationship is going to be? If it's a very simple relationship, take a very simple method. Otherwise, you're overshooting. And do you need to do some pre-processing? And that relates back to the beginning. Do you need to organize your data? Do you need to standardize it in some way? So that was a very short trip through optimization and machine learning, which for today concludes my introduction on data analysis, optimization, mathematics, and machine learning. I think it's a good time to have a break here. Feel free to hang on and ask me any questions. Becca, well, shall we start, Becca and Hein?
Yeah,
what would be a good time?
Let's give another 5 minutes. So if anyone wants to go get some more water, go to the toilet, that kind of thing, please do so. If you have questions for Marleen, we can ask them now. And then Hein will start talking specifically about the Zero Hunger Lab at 4:45 Netherlands time. So that's 5 minutes, everybody.
Perfect.
Anybody have questions for Marleen? The chat has been very lively, Marleen.
I noticed that.
The last comment, so this is what Elon Musk has been up to.
Pretty much. Yeah, he's doing a...
Hey,
Carmen,
so
go ahead, yeah.
Question. So what's your specialty? I'm sorry, I wasn't here in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what degree do you need to do this stuff?
So to actually do this stuff, there's many different degrees you have. You can do mathematics or computer science, machine learning, data science. There's somewhere in that corner, but that's actually doing the stuff. What is maybe more important is observing when this is able to help you. And then you can find somebody who can do the stuff for you. That's also an option. So if you're not willing to take an entire bachelor's and master's, that's what I try to do here, to give you an idea of the type of questions that we can answer. I don't know, what is your background?
I'm sorry, I'm in civil engineering. Like, it's very far from that, but yeah. I have background in counter-radicalization. We have done surveys, but like, this streamlines everything a lot. Like, I can see the possibilities in it.
Yeah, I think that's most important. Actually, civil engineering is not that far. To be honest, if you have a background in civil engineering, using machine learning, I don't think it's that difficult for you.
Yeah, I'm good in statistics, but
there you go.
You're better, more qualified than I am, Harman. I think too, the example of the food and diet costs and nutrition and sustainability is a really great one for us to bear in mind in terms of, like, it's one thing to know all of this or be able to make a computer kind of help us understand all this data, but somebody still has to make the decision, right? About like which of these factors is most important and what this means in terms of the ethics and the policy and how it influences our programming, right? And so Harman, what you're pointing out now too, I think is a really important thing. Like, this is why we work in teams, right? So that you have someone who can make the computer do the work. And then you have other people who are saying, okay, here's what that means. Here are the implications for people. And one of the great things of research institutes like the Zero Hunger Lab at Tilburg is that you've got people from all different backgrounds working on that same problem. So you get a really good kind of 360-degree view of everything and are processing all of that at once.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really eye-opening. Like, I loved it. Like, I'm definitely going to pursue this. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mohammed, and then Walid, I'll get to your question.
Okay, yeah, my question is regarding the deep learning and machine learning. As actually, the challenge we have here is the amount of data, because we know that the accuracy is related to the amount of data we have. So sometimes for small organizations or small initiatives, we have that lack of data to have that high accuracy to get the most of this machine learning algorithm.
Yeah.
And how we could tackle that. Like sometimes, yeah, we struggle also with augmentation to double the amount of data we have, so we could have high accuracy, but also still, yeah, we have a shortage of data itself. So how we could do more harvesting to help the initiative got an algorithm with high accuracy.
Yeah, exactly. So that also relates to the earlier question. You can still use public data, but also it determines your choice of method. So there are very, very advanced methods, but for those you need large amounts of data. If you have less data and you use a simpler method, you're searching for the like the low-hanging fruits. We call it the low-hanging fruits, but those are the simpler relationships, which you can also find with less data. That may not give you the high accuracy that you can get with large amounts of data, but you can still make some improvement and make the first steps. And usually those first steps are even more important than the final tweaks at the very end.
Incredible. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and see a little bit more detail about what this looks like in action as Hein talks us through the Zero Hunger Labs. Everybody, please keep asking these questions in the chat. We'll circle back to them. Hopefully Marleen and Hein will have some time at the end of this. And if not, we will also kind of keep it going in the rest of the programs and our other sessions for this, because they all certainly come together and there are a lot of incredible questions, technically, ethically, and just programmatically, right, about how to apply all of this. So Hein, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Becca, for this nice introduction, and welcome all of you. And of course, congratulations to the women today, but also congratulations to the men, I would say, that we can celebrate this. And I hope in the future this will not, in fact, be needed anymore, because we are really equal. What I would like to do is tell you a little bit about Zero Hunger, on which is based. And what I do is I'm not going to go through the timeline in detail, but just to give you a little bit of highlights. And based on, let's say, the fundament which Marleen has given you in data science, I have been working in data science quite a long time. So I was working for these enterprises and making big enterprises, making more and more profit. And some 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, I thought, hey, maybe we can do something more with our data science. And just at that time, I won a famous prize in mathematics, in applying mathematics, because I'm really an applicant, and I'm not the theoretical guy. But I like to apply it to all kinds of problems that happen in industry, but also in this world. And at that time, I was working for TNT Express, and TNT had, under guidance of this man, Peter Bakker, had set up a really nice public-private partnership with WFP in Rome. And so Peter asked me, because I was working a lot for him in the transportation industry, and he asked me, hey, Hein, can we also do something, do you think, for WFP? And I like challenges, so I said, why not? The context will be different, the problems will be different, but I've never in my whole life seen a case where we couldn't apply data science in some form. Just as Marleen explained, sometimes you get let's say, a kind of first idea, a direction, and in other cases, when all things come together, good data, good modeling, good computer power, then you can really go a step further. So what we did is I started to talk to the WFP, to the managers, and they didn't believe me at all. Because mathematics, they said literally to me, Hein, you know, we have to ship tonnages here, and we have to ship very many tonnages, and that is true. But they didn't believe that, let's say, that mathematics or data science could help them. But I'm a little bit perseverant, so I kept talking to them for a number of years, and I asked them, is it okay if we start up some pilot projects with master thesis students from our university? And that's what we did. So from 2012, 2013, we started to optimize the supply chains of WFP. And I was very lucky because I could guide 5 students in a row. And the 3rd student is Koen Peters, and and I'm very happy that he is right now also working part-time at the Zero Hunger Lab. But the 3rd student, he really developed what I had in mind, but he did even more. And so what he did is he constructed an end-to-end supply chain model, and the results were really famous. Within WFP, they simply didn't believe it. And we took as a case Iraq, and we could show them such big savings. And in the beginning, they had some comments on the things we found, and it was logical because we didn't take all the things into account. But later on, they, slowly but steadily, these kind of things, they faded away. And they could not say anything else than, oh, wow, this is much better than we have thought. So, and from there on, you see, Koen was, became part of WFP, he was recruited, he could set up his own team. And in 2018, together we have won the Dutch Coalition for Humanitarian Innovation Award on this work. But much more important is that there is now, the tool is called Optimus, and I'll explain you a little bit more later, that in these years, there's a worldwide rollout of Optimus. And that means that, let's say on this planet, with the same amount of money, we can feed much, much more people. And that has led, in fact, to the establishment and the founding of the Zero Hunger Lab. Because when you look to WFP, then you are, let's say, on the right part of this picture. And we are talking about emergency relief. And WFP does an amazing job. They got the Nobel Peace Prize this year. And I think that it's really, really worth it, because they feed around 100 million people per year. 100 million. It's an amazing amount. And all over the place, all over the planet, and at very difficult places. But when we were talking at the university, and Marleen was also part of that, and with some of the colleagues, we were thinking, hey, these guys at WFP, they can feed 100 million people. But when you look to the FAO statistics, the World Food Organization, they come to an amount of nearly 700 million people who go to bed hungry every night. So that's very simple mathematics for us. 700 minus 100 is 600. And so 600 million, what's happening for these 600 million people? And that was in fact the trigger for us. Hey, can't we do more with data science? Because we have this nice application and we are proud of it, but it's not, in the end, it is not the solution to the problem of hunger. And so that's why we thought, hey, let's take data science, because we are all data science people, as Marleen has explained, all these kind of fields, and let's apply it to zero hunger in all kind of forms, so that we have a more sustainable, more affordable food chains in this world, and so that we can feed everybody on this planet. And that's what you see on the right part. So sustainable development, because in the end, we believe that will be a kind of future solution. And what we do in the Zero Hunger Lab is what we always call from bites to bites. But in the end, as Marleen explained, we want to take better decisions. And we can take better decisions with data science. And we will definitely be working also in emergency relief, because there will also always be emergencies. We cannot avoid that. But when we can move more to this side, to the sustainable development side, we can really make the difference. And so, what is the Zero Hunger Lab? It's in fact, it's a scientific institute. So we need to publish our papers, but we also want to have impact. And we try to balance the two. And how are we going to do this? And Marleen didn't cut the grass for me, so I can explain this. Thank you, Marleen. So when you look to the field of data science, then you see it's typically divided in 4 areas. And so first of all, you have descriptive analytics, as it's called. And with descriptive analytics, you look what happened. And many of you will probably know, then you use statistics, you maybe use dashboards, and you look, in fact, to the data from the past. And you look what happened. And you try to give it a meaning. But one step further is what we call diagnostic analytics. And then you try to strive for insight. And in fact, you are looking here why it happened. Why did the food price in November in Ghana go up for wheat or for peas or whatever? And then you start to do kind of root cause analysis, and you start to do data mining. And you try to find more evidence what happened. And it can give you a lot of insight. So there's nothing wrong. And then you come into the areas which are called predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics. And predictive is about what will happen. And that's in fact forecasting, but also the machine learning, as Marleen explained, simulation kind of techniques, scenario management, all these kind of things. And we have prescriptive analytics. And there in prescriptive analytics, in fact, you let the computer help you decide. And so the computer generates also part of the scenarios and it optimizes. And then you are in techniques like artificial intelligence or optimization, as Marleen has explained. And as Zero Hunger Lab, we are mostly focused in this green box. This is more what IT people do, and this is more what we at the Zero Hunger Lab do. And both are needed, so there's nothing right or wrong. But let me give you some examples of the work we are doing. And so this is Optimus. Optimus is currently used and rolled out by the World Food Programme, and they use it in all their big operations. So what happens, in fact, is a lot of input is gathered from all kinds of systems. And when you look to this whole picture, then maybe you think this is the most difficult part, but and this is mathematically difficult. But I think the most difficult part is in here. That's in gathering the data. Marleen showed you this example of the databases, and in fact, the example she showed is from these databases. So in a nutrition database is registered in another way than in a funding database or in a procurement database. But once you start to optimize, you want to have a kind of broad look over the entire system, in this case, the end-to-end supply chain. So you need a lot of data. You need to know where the beneficiaries are. You need to know what you want to give them. And you need to know what your funding is. And all kinds of things. What kind of cash-based transfers can you do? Or should you bring everything in a physical way? And so there are lots of things. But once you have gathered all these inputs together with some field expertise, then you have this optimization engine. We showed always as a Rubik cube because it's looking at very many combinations and it's optimizing, like the way Marleen explained. And then in the end, you come to a kind of optimal plan, and you can do all kinds of scenarios analysis. So what if the food price of rice suddenly rises with a factor 2? Due to climate issues, due to a flood or whatever. So this is what the planners do. So they prepare the information, they push a button on the engine calculates for quite a while, and then it comes back with an optimal plan, and it shows you all kinds of graphs, all kinds of trade-offs. Typically the trade-off which Marleen was explaining, and when you have multiple choices, then you get the line, which is what we call the Pareto line, which is a very efficient line, but you have to choose a point on that line. And of course, we are working for WFP, so they are in the most remote areas. So everything should work via relatively thin lines along the web. And this is what we have done, let's say, in a kind of pre-phase of the Zero Hunger Lab. And in fact, we are still working on it, because in this optimization engine, to give you an idea, we are thinking about including new things. How can we make these cash-based transfers better in the optimization engine? But also, how can we include uncertainty? Because we can think of that we know, let's say, the price of food in the nutrition database, but the price of food, as you know, might vary very much. We think we know the amount of beneficiaries, but you know, we have big refugee flows from week to week. You might have a very different amount of people which you need to feed. But for us, the thing is, we can deal with that. So in mathematics, you can deal with the uncertainty which is in the data. And that's typically, let's say, research which we are doing. Another one, and where's Hedja? This is the work where Hedja is working on, and we also like this example very much. And this is about what we call the child growth monitor. This is work which we do together, and especially Hedja, Marleen, and her supervisor Erik Posma, Professor Erik Posma. They do this work for Welthungerhilfe, together with the Welthungerhilfe. So what is the idea? With a child growth monitor, you take an image or a small movie of a child, and with these deep learning techniques, which Marleen explained, you try to identify whether a child is malnourished or not. So what is the classical way? You have to weigh a child, you have to measure the child, and that means that let's say a mother has to go to another village with the whole family, or maybe 2 villages further. And so that is, and moreover, you need a doctor, you need a nurse. So it has a huge impact on the capacity of the medical sector to do this. So the idea of Welthungerhilfe was to make a kind of machine learning algorithm where, by making a small movie of a child or taking some pictures, that we already could identify, or there's a relatively high accuracy that we can predict whether a child might be malnourished. And then you could, for these children, you could even do a kind of second opinion, or you could, when we could really do it right, then you can immediately detect it. And now this is work which is ongoing. You can ask Hedja all about it, because she knows much more about it than I do. But it is fantastic work, because it is it also has a huge impact. And there you see what we try to achieve within the Zero Hunger Lab, this balance of impact and science. Once this works very well, it means that a lot of medical capacity is freed up, but also for a lot of mothers, it makes life much easier, especially in Africa, where transport is not that easy as in other parts of the world. And in that case, we could help, and WFP is here also one of the big clients of Welthungerhilfe. And so we hope in the next years to really come up with very good solutions. But also the mathematics behind is very difficult. How to interpret, let's say, the picture of a child, given that the mother maybe has a distance of 2 meters, maybe she took it from above, maybe she took it a little bit from the side. There's all kinds of lights and shadows on the pictures, and the machine learning algorithm should somehow try to cope with that. A third example is the optimization and this is a project which we have finalized. It's, as you might know, around the world there are 6 depots, which we call humanitarian response depots. So if a disaster strikes, immediately, let's say, aid goods are transported from these humanitarian response depots to the disaster place. and these are strategically located. And what we did is, or what the question to us was, are these 6 sufficient, or should these 6 be in another place? And this is what we call location and allocation problems. And what we did is also with this robust optimization, we looked into the number and the location needed of these humanitarian response depots. Now, then referring back once again to Marleen, if you calculate how many solutions you have, there's already 6 depots on various places in the world, you come already to this big number. Even for a computer, quite a thing to. So what we did is we made a kind of map of all kinds of places where we could have a response depot, and we mapped it onto the worldwide disaster database, which exists, EN.dot, but also the UN has its own databases. We used both, in fact, disaster database, and we looked to better places. And we found, in fact, that some of the depots were located quite well, but others could be very worthwhile to investigate new locations. For example, this one in South Africa. And this is currently not there, but it could be helpful to have it there. This is the one which Marleen already explained. This is about the food. This is the last one I wanted to discuss, is about the infrastructure. Often after a disaster, when you think of a flood or an earthquake, the infrastructure is damaged. And then that makes it very difficult to distribute food and water. And what we want to know is how coherent the network is after a disaster. And what we want to do is we have the nodes and the link in the infrastructure, maybe from Twitter or all kinds of information gathering. We know which nodes and links are damaged. And then we have an algorithm that can quickly determine the most important nodes and links to repair. Because you can imagine when there is, let's say here, from here to here is a bridge, and the bridge is damaged, then to connect these areas, you need to repair somehow, maybe very provisionally, but you need to repair the bridge. And in that way, this algorithm can easily detect which nodes, so nodes are more or less the crossings, or which links in the network you have to repair, so that you, in a relatively short while, you can already cover most of the network again. And this is, let's say, a method which we have developed, but there is not yet a customer. But this is part, let's say, of our research, and we are discussing with others how this could work. I skipped this one, and to finalize, I would like to highlight a few things how this works in practice. And so, what I already explained to you in the WFP example, many people at NGOs, they don't believe in math or data science. They think we simply have to do this. What could this data science contribute? And so what we did in the case of WFP, we developed a small game. And if you like, but we need a little bit more time than today, we can play this game with. It takes 2.5 hours in total. But if you like, we can play it. You play it in teams of 3. And it's based on real information from South Sudan, where you have to deliver food to 6 places. And you see it over here. These are the places you need to visit. Here is the depot where the food is stored. How are you going to transport this food in the coming 5 years? And because it's a 5-year plan, but the roads are also not that well organized in South Sudan. And so you also need, you need to buy food, you need to transport food, but you also need to repair roads and keep them in a certain condition. Because if there's no road, you cannot drive with the food. And so we have developed a small game and you can play it in 1 hour with a team of 3, and then you will have to find out, let's say, what the best solution is, so that you bring the most food to these areas in the 5 seen over the 5 years. Now we have that really helped, because that started to trigger some managers, because this is really an easy problem. But there you see what the combinatorial explosion, which Marleen explained. And even these managers who are working day and night in this area, they couldn't solve this problem in 1 hour. And the computer was calculating everything for them. And in 1 hour, the best solution, and that's what we normally see, the best solutions come around 3 to 4% from the best solution. And that's for a very easy, let's say, a kind of toy problem. So apart that we are really solving big issues, then you are much farther off in solving these kind of things. But the game helped to change the minds a little bit, not of everybody, but for some. And then I told you about the master thesis students, and now, but we are really talking 8 years later. 8 years later, we are talking, and we have the attention of senior management, and we are talking about a worldwide rollout. So it's not something which you do overnight. This is data science. Now, so how does it work? And so first of all, we sit together with, let's say, an NGO or with the UN or whatever organization, maybe a local government. We define what they want to know. Then we do a lot of work in gathering data, but also cleansing data. And cleansing is the process of getting the data in a very good way. Then we work with our tools. That's more on our side. We develop algorithms. We use tools. And then we come back with some outcomes. And when the outcomes are good, then of course we can proceed. If they are not good, we have to go back to either the data gathering or the algorithm. But in the end, we get insight. Maybe we get a kind of model, or we get a kind of app which can be used, and we can come to better decisions. And that's the way how Zero Hunger Lab works in all these kind of things. Now, to conclude, this is the areas where I think we are good at. Now, so the 2 big balls have been discussed by Marleen. There are other data science techniques that can also be used. And in fact, we can say at Zero Hunger Lab, we master more or less all of them. And we are constantly looking towards good applications, impactful applications in the field of zero hunger. So my final call to you would be, if you see any opportunities in the countries where you come from or organizations where you work with, then yeah, please come to us, and I think we can help you. So thank you for your attention. I see that time's up a little bit, and please feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Again, a very lively chat happening. I think you will definitely be taken up on the offer of a gameplay at some point. Could you talk maybe, as some others have some questions too, I'm sure, but a little bit more about how public participation in this data science can help? The game is definitely one fantastic thing. We also saw examples like with the smartphone app and how that can kind of help people be more involved in their data collection and creation, and just a little bit more about how to kind of make human all of these things that can feel a little bit scary or far away, especially for communities where data literacy isn't very common.
Yeah, so there are very many ways, and Marleen also partly answered this question. And so there are very many ways how we can gather data, and it is true that in local communities often, yeah, the data is not readily available. Maybe it's there, but it's on let's say on pieces of paper, and it's in PDFs maybe, and these kind of things. And sometimes you should take the effort to translate it, to transform it. But there are also other ways, and one of the things on which we are working, or which we have worked, an initiative like GDELT. Maybe you have heard about GDELT. GDELT is a huge Google database where news items from all countries all over the world have been translated to English keywords, and where you can search on these keywords. And you can do all kinds of counting, you can do all kinds of correlations and these kind of things. I know that also colleagues of us, they have found, for example, refugee patterns. For example, the refugee flows towards Europe. The European Statistical Bureau, they are gathering all kinds of information about refugee flows, and then 3 months later they come with a report, and then you see the inflow. But what colleagues of us did, they looked at Google keywords and they looked at Twitter and Facebook. They simply counted keywords, and they were able to predict as good as the Statistics Bureau, with simply the data of Google of yesterday. They were simply able to estimate the flows. So there are very many ways, creative ways, to come to data and to bundle it. Also, for example, satellite data. If you have access to it, then we could also use that. So there are very many ways, but it depends a bit on the situation.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this might sound silly for your level, but I'm just thinking, can I make like machine learning with Microsoft Excel or Access without learning any programming languages? Is that possible?
Not directly, but close to. Because if you have your data in Excel or Access, there are so-called machine learning environments which can where you can specify where your data is, and that might be in an Access database or that might be in an Excel spreadsheet. But you should be careful, because for machine learning you often need a lot of data. It's not that if you only have a few records that you can already start. You really need a lot of data. But in the connection is possible, yes.
And on that note, I'll also say we're currently working on what phase 2 of this program will look like. And what we want to do is really help all of you dive into your specific projects and scale them up by doing some monitoring and evaluation, some impact assessment, these kind of things. So for those of you who have problems and you're sitting here going, wait, data learning and this session has really encouraged me and inspired me, and I think that this could help me figure out, a solution to what I'm trying to do, please let us know, because part of what we'll be doing with phase 2 is also bringing in mentors like Hein and Marleen to work way more specifically with you on here's how to actively do all these things with what you've got. So keep feeding those brainstorming ideas in, and we'll see what all magic we can make happen. But it's not magic, it's data science. And Hein, one question from the chat, Ahmed would love to read more about the cases of like the Google learning and those kind of things. So if you do have any links or articles about those that you don't mind sending through with the slides, we can share them out with all the participants.
Yeah. Of course, the slides of today you will get, and further we would like to refer to our website. Because on our website, we try to keep it up to date with the latest research, the kind of projects which we have done, and these kind of things. But we will send that. Yeah.
Thank you. And another thing that has come in, which is maybe less for Hein and Marleen and maybe more for one of our political workshops later, in terms of one of the main problems about the availability of data is that you may have to pay for papers related to the problems, right? So the kind of gatekeeping of academic journalism and scientific results from that. And then is data accessibility considered one of the issues today? Do people need to pay to get relevant data? One of the frameworks here, right, that researchers in Europe very much benefit from is that there's a huge culture and legal framework around public participation in environmental decision-making and governance, right, which helps us get data, right? It's kind of like built into the legal, political, and social structures that like we're always allowed to ask for information. That culture is starting to pick up more and more in the Arab region. And actually one of our partner participants recently wrote her thesis on data journalism and will lead Germany specifically these questions that you're asking and kind of where the legal markers for the air world and data access are starting to shift. But that's definitely a good thing to flag, and something that I think would make an excellent phase 2 project as well, as just kind of a campaign to work on that data access. For now, Harman, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm trying to get the most out of this. Like, I don't think I'll get another chance. Hopefully I will. But so I'm thinking more practically, like, could you provide me with some leads, like to get more involved into the practicals of data analysis without getting a PhD or like, you know, master's or anything?
Yeah. I think we can,
like,
Marleen.
Pardon, do I need like to learn JavaScript or something, like some leads, basic leads?
What if you want to, let's say, to learn a computer language which is perfectly suited for data science kind of things, I would advise you to learn Python. Python is used very often, and it's relatively easy to learn, and
it's license free.
And it's license free indeed. So you can simply download it. There are some very good environments. You can easily couple it with let's say Excel, what you were referring to, and yeah. So I would definitely,
Yeah, that's quite interesting. But like, would you advise any resources specifically on that data analysis? Because Python is like a whole world. Like, it's not just based.
And I think we can provide some links there, Marleen.
Yes, exactly. Should we send that to Becca, or because
that
if
would
there's
be great? Yeah,
interested,
we'll send it out. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Again, Marleen and Hein, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a fantastic overview, both of kind of data science and machine learning, and how we might start to think of that as useful for all of our projects, no matter what they're related to. And then also a really great introduction and some just incredible work happening on SDG 1 and Zero Hunger. So thank you very much for your time and for this work more broadly, and for sharing it with us. With that, we will share the recording and the slides and all of these links out with the next group. And our next Equipping Young Peacemakers event is this Sunday, the 14th of March. Dr. Hassan from Iraq will be speaking to us about applying design thinking and problem solving while we're leading teams to make all this happen. So do chime in for that. Of course, we'll email it out and put it in the WhatsApp chat as well. Thanks, everybody. Take care and happy Monday.
Thank you for the invitation, Becca.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your attention, and keep up your good work, because I really like what you are doing, what Becca and Hedja told us. It was really fantastic.